Hello viewers and welcome to Newswire. I am the host Muneeb Hamid and today we are bringing you an exclusive show today. Especially we are interviewing Mushaal Hussein Mullick with us today. But before we start our interview, let's focus on Syed Geelani, the man who fought for Kashmir's freedom and Kashmir's top separatist leader, and who spearheaded the resistance movement against the Indian rule. And obviously he passed away aged 92. Now, I'm sure all of you must know Geelani was suffering from many ailments and was detained in his house for the greater part of his life since 2010. And that's when the Indian-administered Kashmir witnessed a massive anti-India uprising also. Now, the world still is blind to the cries of Kashmiris. And what is the future of the Kashmir after the demise of Syed Geelani, and where does the resistant movement stand today? So we have with us Mushaal Hussein Mullick, wife of prominent Kashmiri leader Yasin Mullick, and she is also a chairperson of Peace and Culture who is struggling for the tranquility of the people of Kashmir. She is a freedom fighter and craft revivalist who fights for the rights of the innocent people. Mushaal Hussein Mullick, welcome to Newswire now. Before we start, just walk us through the life of Syed Geelani.
I think he was not just an asset or a legend for the Kashmiri people, but I believe that in this day and age, you don't see such leaders being born throughout his life. If you recall his journey and the way he fought for the right to self-determination, he had a principled, steadfast stance. And though a lot of people called him hardliner, but I think to a large extent he was correct, because we've seen over the past 50 years many bilateral dialogues between India and Pakistan, and he was always against those dialogues because he firmly believed that India is going to backtrack or is going to gain more time and dilly-dallying tactics through dialogues or through distraction, and through that he will strengthen his occupation in India. But Pakistan has always been there for Kashmiris and supported them. But I think the wisdom, the far-sightedness of Geelani Saab right now, especially after abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, the world is recognizing that the wisdom, the thought, the vision, the broad vision. And he was right, because India, whatever it has done in the past with Kashmiris, before it was their occupational forces, but now their public has also come there as settlers, and every day more and more Indians are getting residency certificates over there. It's a colossal loss for us. It's something so huge that it cannot really actually seep into my system right now. We feel orphaned. And especially me and my husband, because we had a personal bond with him. And then when I got married on the first day that I landed in Kashmir, it was 6th of September 2009, and that day I went there as a bride of Kashmir, but also as the first Pakistani public figure after getting married to a Hurriyat leader. So the love, the affection that I saw from the public and the greetings, and I can never forget how Syed Geelani Saab, he found us, he sent gifts, and he would always, send me prayers and best wishes, because naturally his stance was also for the love of Pakistan. So I saw that on ground, that you have a struggle of right to self-determination, but at the same time there's a natural affinity towards Pakistan, and a lot of credit for that goes to Syed Geelani Saab for being a big champion for the voice of Pakistan over there, and as a support system for, but at the same time, though his narrative was Kashmir banega Pakistan, yahan Pakistani hai, but at the same time he strongly and firmly believed that Kashmiris must be given their right to plebiscite and their right to decide if they want to be independent, they want to be with Pakistan. That right should be given to them. And a few years before his death in 2016 and 17, joint resistance leadership was formed between the Hurriyat leadership, and my husband spearheaded that unity, and he drove all the way to Geelani Saab because he was house arrested. There he picked up Mr. Mirwais in his car, because that unity factor is a literal death for India, because India has always tried in some way or the other trying to divide and rule, but Kashmiri Hurriyat leadership has always been very staunch, very firm and very steadfast in their struggle. But then they formed this joint resistance leadership through which they were protesting against all the nefarious designs of the Modi regime. And it was quite successful because they were jointly protesting, joint calendars were being issued by the Hurriyat leadership. Top tier leadership is Mr. Geelani, Mr. Yasin, Mr. Mirwais, and it was going really well, and that was the reason why my husband was also given a poisonous injection in central jail a few years back. It was because of this unity that he spearheaded with Mr. Geelani. And I know our leadership has paid a heavy price, but all this set apart, I mean, the pain was there, the agony, the loss. I mean, we cannot even recover from the loss. That it's an irreparable loss. But how he was buried, I mean, that is so painful. I mean, we don't even have a right to, bury our loved ones. I mean, the revenge does not end with our lifetime. It goes beyond till the grave and way ahead also.
I'm sure. We're talking about revenge now and the Indian brutalities, continuous Indian brutalities. After Syed Ali Geelani passed away, his family was barred from attending the funeral, and his body was also snatched away. What kind of behavior is this from the Indian regime, and how did the Kashmiri people look at this?
It's a barbaric act. It's so inhuman that they've even forgotten the Indian state, that everyone has to leave this world. We're all mortals, and we all have to face God Almighty, no matter what religion we belong to. And it was his last dying will that he wanted to be buried in the graveyard of the martyrs, and that was not fulfilled. And the way his dead body was ruthlessly snatched and pulled out, not even without a stretcher. I mean, the way they pulled him out when the whole family was mourning after his death. He died at 10 o'clock, and then the family relatives were over. They were sitting around, and suddenly the Indian army barged in, and already his home has been declared a sub-jail for over a decade, and he died under confinement, such a great leader. And then when his family was mourning, the Indian army barged into their homes and they started beating up the people, and they switched off the lights so nobody can make a video of it. And the women, the wife of late Syed Ali Geelani Saab, highly respectable lady, their daughter-in-law, she was beaten up, they were bruised. And all this news came a day after, because we were all in shock. And as we all know, that for almost 5 days there was complete blanket ban on communications on internet and telephone lines, and there was a complete razor sharp concertia rolled around everywhere. It was a very shoot to kill curfew. And in that situation, in the dead of the night, they buried him, they dug a grave, and they buried such a legendary leader against his own dying will, and against, following the ritual rites, the rituals of burying a man. I mean, the family, they could not even wash his body, the sons, the ghusl, they couldn't do that. And they were not present because they were locked from the outside. When they snatched the dead body, there was resentment, the lights were off, they were trying to take the dead body inside, and they were screaming and wailing. And that's the time when the Indian army locked them up all in the house. And they took him to Hyderpura and they dug a grave for him. And I don't know what they did with him, how they buried him, who was around. And it's very painful that the revenge with the dead body, with the loved ones, with the relatives of such an important leader, even if he was not a leader. I mean, it's basic human rights, the way, and I think we need to invent a new form of human rights violation coming from India, what they do with our dead bodies. If you recall what happened with Maqbool Bhatt Shaheed and with Afzal Guru Shaheed, till date we have not received their dead bodies. They are buried somewhere in Tihar. And many a times dead bodies are mutilated, and they take out their hatred or immense anger. I don't know what. It's just unending revenge coming from the Indian state and their army.
I'm sure this is quite hard to hear, and I'm sure it must be extremely difficult for the immediate family and obviously his followers to hear such news that his body was snatched away and his family was barred from attending his funeral, and obviously all the rights were not also fulfilled. Now, Syed Ali Geelani had been a thorn in India's side since the early 1960s. Now, after he is gone, and obviously he has done his part of the work now, where does the resistance movement stand today?
You know, actually, I've been talking on and expressing my views, especially post Article 370, 35A abrogation, that the game plan of India is basically to completely ban the political mobilization. Media, there's a complete bar on independent media reporting over there already, even pre-Article 370 abrogation, but now it has come forward with a complete strategy. There's a curfew on the media, and India is trying its level best to to make our entire movement leaderless, and because it's the leaders that basically call the shots. The sentiment is obviously it's a homegrown narrative of independence. It's an indigenous, spirit of the Kashmiri people that they are leading this movement. But at the forefront, obviously, you need to have leaders. If you didn't have Quaid-e-Azam, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, I don't think it would be possible to be sitting in Pakistan. Such leaders are legendary. They're born in centuries. It's not like, dynastic politics taking place there or electoral politics. It's a revolutionary politics in which you need leaders with extraordinary skills, patience, bravery, and a lot of towering qualities. And I think he was a man of his commitment, and for leaders of revolutionary politics, they need to sacrifice every moment of their life, their personal needs. They have to give up their financial security, their security of life, because our leadership, if you compare that with other leaderships around the world, I mean, you've seen the Afghani Taliban. I mean, if they were raised or killed by the native forces, do you think that there could ever be peace in this region? Because those leaderships represent a movement. Absolutely. And they went to Qatar for the Doha dialogue, and peace building measures can only succeed if, even after wars or during wars, when the representatives are alive, and if they're eliminated, like what they did with Geelani Sahab, or what they're doing with my husband Muhammad Yasin Mullick, who is languishing in the death cell where Afzal Guru was and Maqbool Bhatt were hanged, the same compound, and he's being physically and mentally tortured. Then you have Asya Andrabi Sahiba, she's in Tihar jail, she's an asthmatic patient, and COVID is spreading there at a very fast pace, and because one of the major reasons is because the Indian prisons are overly populated, especially after 5th of August abrogation, when thousands and thousands of Kashmiris were locked up. So in that kind of situation, the risk increases of the spread of COVID. And then you have Ashraf Sarai Saab. He was poisoned in jail and martyred. He was the successor of Syed Ali Geelani Sahab. And we lost all these gems. And now that the alive leadership that we have, there's no access to them. I can't speak to my husband. They don't have legal access. There are death trials being opened against them. They're involving them in fraudulent cases of terror funding. So how do you expect any kind of movement going forward when the leadership is locked up? There's a blanket ban on Hurriyat, political mobilization. People can't come out. So who is going to come forward? The public, obviously. It's law of nature that when such movements are going on, because the sacrifices are immortal that the Kashmiri people are giving away for their right to freedom. Law of nature does say that one goes, another comes forward, but for that new one to emerge, there is no environment anymore, even to give a call of protest or a call for a jalsa or rally or an ijtima or a strike. I mean, there are strikes going on, but it's not getting any coverage internationally because nobody has access. So obviously this movement will continue. There's no doubt about that. But my fear is that if the top tier leadership or even the second tier leadership, what they're doing with them. If they're eliminated, then I think there would be complete anarchy, not just in Kashmir, but the entire region, because this is a nuclear ticking time bomb. And this is my appeal to the international world also, that this movement is going to go on. It's written with our blood and soul, and there's no end, no denial to that. We have to continue with this mission. I'm going to continue with it. A lot of others, a diaspora abroad, divided families of Kashmiris. But for how long can we go on if the leadership is not safeguarded, or the people of Kashmir, the genocide that's being committed? The way you see, it's a brazen Nazi order. The way you have the gas chambers, now you have the curfew chambers, you have the killing chambers over there right now. You have underground cells in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where thousands and thousands of missing persons, the youth, is being eliminated. So it's all happening right now, and I see that the political space day by day, or the political peaceful space, is shrinking with every moment. So I think I don't see any solution.
The Indian regime has been taking down the political leadership. Now we have a report that police in the Indian occupied Kashmir have also opened a case against the family members of the late resistance leader Syed Ali Geelani Shah under a harsh anti-terror law for allegedly raising anti-India slogans and wrapping his body in the Pakistani flags.
Yeah, that's true, because for this current, especially this Hindutva and RSS followers government under the Modi regime, for them their entire politics is based on anti-Pakistan and anti-Kashmir narrative. So it's a brilliant move from their electoral point of view, if you look at it, that more and more bloodshed of Muslims, of Kashmiris, blaming everything on Pakistan. But it's a reality. There's a very strong sentiment and love and affection for Pakistan, for the right to self-determination, and there's no denial to that. And we've seen a lot of videos, protests happening there since decades in the love of Pakistan, because Pakistan is the only country which is supporting Kashmiris, and there are many countries, but it is officially signatory of the UN resolutions. It's a party to the dispute, and though the principal party are the Kashmiris, but whatever they're doing, it's like these, for them, every Kashmiri who speaks the language of freedom, of integrity, of pride, honor and identity is a terrorist. Even my name is included in NIA. What have I done, or what has Geelani Saab's family done? We are speaking up, supporting our peaceful resistance movement, which is our right, which is a right given to us according to the Universal Human Rights Charter. But the Modi regime is surpassing, is superseding all international norms, Geneva Conventions, treaties, the Apartheid Convention. They are signatory to all these things. But nothing is being implemented, because right now, whatever's taking place in India or within Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, especially here, because we are not part of India, it's a jungle law, because they have broken the organ that was connecting them with the disputed territory. They came there on an administrative grounds, but they became complete occupiers. Now they're complete plunderers right now, and the biggest land grabbing is going on. So obviously they're going to target the families, the loved ones of the top tier leadership. They have done that in the past with me. They've done that with my in-laws. They've done that with Shabir Shah's families. They've done that with Mehbooba Asiya Andrabi's family. So this has been going on. This is an old practice of India, but now, since the past two regimes of Modi, we are seeing the pace of violence and intolerance against the Kashmiri voices of dissent, you could say, or the voice of the people. That is complete no. It's unacceptable. So I pray for the family. They're in grief right now. It's a grief for the entire nation. We are mourning, and yet this is what they're doing. I mean, this is. It's so tragic that Kashmiris, I don't know what crime we've committed, that our journey for freedom has become so painful and so long. And but I agree that when we talk about freedom movements and resistance, there's actually no time frame or a calendar to know that in the next 5 to 10, 50 years we will get our freedom, but it can even take centuries when we look back in history. but it's such tall leadership, they become the symbol of that resistance. But such shameful acts will, I think, strengthen our resolve. No matter how many bars they do file against cases against the family of Mr. Geelani, how they buried him, this has really, not just the resolve, the commitment, but also the fire in the right to self-determination, because India wants to break the will of the Kashmiris. So such acts, in fact, they don't break our will, they strengthen it. Our nerves become of steel. And we've seen that in the past, after Burhan Wani's shahadat, after Ashraf Sarai's shahadat. We have seen that whenever India has tried to bar Kashmiris or their freedom, we have come out stronger than before, and we have combated it with even more faith and integrity, and I would say blind faith.
Right. Now, Mushaal, let's talk about the major developments that have recently happened in South Asia, to be specific of Afghanistan, and the rise of Taliban to power. They defeated the superpower. They fought for 20 years, and obviously they were termed as the terrorists as well by the United States, NATO, and also India as well. As you mentioned, that all the freedom fighters in Kashmir are labeled as terrorists as well. Now, we have a statement that was issued in an interview, the spokesperson of the Taliban, Mr. Suhail Shaheen. In an interview, he said that they are going to raise their voice for Kashmir, and they are not going to keep quiet for the atrocities that the Muslim brothers face in Kashmir by India. How important is this statement, and how does Kashmir look at this?
We welcome this statement because I think any neighboring country around India, especially after the narrative of Akhand Bharat and RSS ideology of spreading it across Azad Kashmir and further ahead, and the irritation that the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, how it has irritated China in Ladakh, and then with Bangladesh and Kala Pani and Nepal, and adding that in their map, India has further, irritated the neighborhood, because nobody wants such hostile and such fascist regimes to come into power, because they affect the entire region's stability and peace, and the continuous warmongering that goes on, and the threat of a war. And we saw nuclear codes being exchanged between India and Pakistan on 27th of February in 2019. So obviously the new regime that's come there, the Taliban, they are tired of wars, and there have been long battles going on in Afghanistan over decades. So they want peace. And I think if they want to work for peace, it's very important that they raise the voice of the Kashmiris, because only it's possible, I think, in South Asia, the tunnel of peace or economic prosperity and security, it goes through Kashmir. Even the economic corridor between of China, Pak-China economic corridor. I think the success of that also depends on a peaceful settlement of the Kashmir issue. So I think that was a responsible statement coming from them. And I think after 2 years of COVID lockdowns around the world, we have seen that the global focus shifted from the Kashmir issue after 5th of August. We saw a lot of condemnation happening all over the world, and condemning such acts, heinous crimes being committed by India through a lawfare committed on 5th of August through a presidential order, making all Kashmiris stateless. So we saw a lot of condemnation, but sadly COVID happened in March 2020, so the focus shifted. Now I see that it will be reverting back to Kashmir, because the Afghanistan issue has also been peacefully settled. I hope there's more peace over there, there's prosperity, and there's more liberation, women are empowered, and there is more maturity amongst the Taliban. And this is a mature statement coming from them, because obviously what India is doing, especially after those anti-minority bills and trying to create torture cells for the minorities over there, just like the Rohingya Muslims in Burma, and trying to ask every Muslim family that if they have documents of property, only then they can stay, and 50-year-old documents, how can you produce such documents that are stamped, that are verified in the past? So it's nearly impossible. So all these plans of targeting the minorities and shifting them to concentration camps. And also, after the abrogation of Article 370, we see how 371 is affected, through which Nagaland, Mizoram, and other states, the Naxalites, they all get affected. So the neighboring countries, including Afghanistan, wants peace with India, and that peace can only happen if the minorities are not targeted. Because if they are targeted, especially the Muslims over there, obviously it will be painful for any human being, and also for the people from other religions, what they're doing with the Sikh community, the farmers movement, the Dalits over there, the forced conversions of the Christians, and RSS has been involved in terrorist activities in the past. So all these things make the case stronger to condemn India's heinous acts, especially under the Modi regime. And the world should be concerned, especially the regional countries should play a pivotal role in putting pressure, exerting pressure on India to stop this policy of violence. And then we see a diversion coming forward right now, especially when you're moving from a unipolar world to a multipolar world, and right now we are in a non-polar world. And this is that ideal time, because nobody is the real king right now that has complete power. So this is the ideal time for the neighboring countries, because before that we saw the blocs were more interested in India because of its economy and everything. It's a huge market. But now I see some changes, that that pressure coming from the United States or from China, everybody is now divided, and now new blocs are emerging. So I think every country can play a very, especially in the region, can play a responsible role, and that will be in the interest of India also, because I think Modi has destroyed India, their economy, everything, and the best distracting factor, or the brilliant moves according to Mr. Modi, is to start some war stunt with Pakistan, or some false flag operation. What happened in Afghanistan, I mean, it's such a joke that the satellite images also came that Pakistan's drones were not, I mean, it's a big laugh, but I think the public of India is so emotional or illiterate, the majority, they believe what Modi, how he acts, but I think...
and we are going to talk about the misinformation and obviously the F-15s flying in Panjshir of the Pakistan Air Force after a short break. We still have with us Mushaal Hussain Mullick. Welcome back, viewers. You're watching Newswire. I am Muneeb Hamid, and we have with us Mushaal Hussain Mullick. And before the break, we were talking about misinformation and how India's media has been manipulating innocent people with fake news and obviously misinformation. And this has become a weapon of India. Now we see that not just in India, but we have also seen India maligning and spreading misinformation in Pakistan, in Kashmir, and also now in Afghanistan now. Tell us, Mushaal, how important is to tackle this misinformation campaigns by India?
It's not something new for India. I mean, this has been going on for decades, for almost, especially 25 years in the Disinfo Lab scam that came forward. Apart from that, their nature of propaganda, it's hyper propagandistic, their approach, and they're very filmy, or you could say they are inspired
by
Bollywood and their lead actors over there. But in reality, their army, or their we've seen a lot of false Abhinandan or many others you could name. So they take inspiration not from the bravery of their army or their armed forces, because they basically terrorists, their army. It's trained to bully, to harass, to use rape as a weapon of war against innocent Kashmiris. So it's a very coward army. So they try to project themselves as heroes and try to portray Kashmiris as terrorists, and also Pakistan internationally. They try to promote this image that Pakistani public and Pakistan is training militancy against India, and it's involved in terrorist activities. And we've seen a lot of blame game, dilly-dallying tactics coming from India, and various talks also, and stalling talks between India and Pakistan by blaming the Mumbai attacks on Pakistan. And then we saw the Pathankot happening. we saw a lot of incidents where India has, without any substantial proof, has blamed everything on Pakistan and on the Kashmiris. So this is something which is not new, because I have been there, I have been going there, I have been seeing the treatment of the media, how they interact, how they publicize, and especially it's a winning tactic for the current regime, especially because they want to spark the sentiments of the public, and the public is hyperly emotional and it's overly charged, and they believe whatever the RSS, Mr. Modi tells them, and the fake publicity that goes on internationally. I'll give you one example, that a few years back I went to a school to give a lecture on Kashmir's culture, history and heritage in Islamabad. It's a private school, and there were young kids over there, primary, and it was nothing very serious. I was giving a nice talk, trying to explain to the youth, to the kids, in very simple terms, what Kashmir is going through, the students, their art, their heritage, and there was media over there, but I had no idea there was ANI over there, and the reporting that was spread in India was that Yasin Malik's wife is trying to promote militancy amongst the youth of Pakistan, amongst little kids. She's promoting that. She's trying to incite violence amongst the public. So this is what she's doing. And I'm an artist, and we are firm believers in non-violence and peaceful means of our pen, our paintbrush. These are our weapons, or our voice. That's the maximum we can do. We are not part of the army. So this is the way it goes on, the fake publicity. But when it goes constantly, consistently, and then when they have a lot of English channels in India, and then their networking skills and the kind of brigades that they send abroad, like people who have learned by heart the fake narrative of India, and they take fake victims with them, that they were attacked in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the Indian tourist, or other blaming tactics on Pakistan of terror funding and whatnot, which they've taken to the fat of, which has many things that have taken place in the past. So all this false narrative has impacted, negatively has affected in the past, but now, since this camp has been exposed internationally, the credibility of the Indian state, because before Mr. Modi, everything was wrapped up. Whatever they were doing it in a concealment, showing that they're secular, they're liberal, but they were doing all kinds of war crimes in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir and proxies against Pakistan. It was not just happening during the Modi regime, it happened during the Congress rule as well, via Afghanistan. So in Balochistan, in Karachi, other places. So slowly and gradually, Pakistan has also countered them internally, but externally, we need to really, really work extra hard to lobby in international human rights organizations, in the UN, in the mechanism, the rapporteurs, the committees, the Geneva Conventions. We need to internationalize it through the ICJ and other platforms to expose India against the false propaganda that it's doing.
Just to add on this, Mushaal, we see the social media headquarters in India that also monitor the content growing from Pakistan.
Yes.
And this is the reason why even my personal and a few journalists of Pakistan, not just few, many journalists of Pakistan's posts regarding Kashmir have been brought down. How important is it for Pakistan to have the social media headquarters in our own country?
I think it's very important, and I think the IT and Information Ministry should work very hard on it and send messages to them and send warning letters to them that what is on our soil in Pakistan, the policy is different from the Indian soil, and there are enemy states, they have a history of wars, and Kashmir does not fall under the parameters and the rules and laws of India, because it's a disputed territory, and banning their voices and campaigning against them or trying to silence them, trying to kidnap our journalists, our no international observers or human rights organizations are allowed there. I mean, we saw in Palestine a few months back when that horrific incident happened at Masjid al-Aqsa. The whole world was condemning and protesting against it. At that time, if you recall, there was a building of international media that was blasted by Israel in Palestine. It was very shocking, condemnable, and barbaric act. But at the same time, I thought that we can't even dream of having any international media and then office or building of entire. It's impossible, literally. So the curfew, the lockdown, the way the entire Kashmir issue has been, in a pressure cooker and without any contact with the world, I think it's very important that Pakistan, because is a voice of Kashmiris, it's very important for them that at least that curfew that India has on Kashmiris over there, that should be removed from the social media in Pakistan.
Right. Also, now we have credible information that Yasin Mullick, your husband's sister and mother, are very critically ill, and their health is continuously deteriorating. And the Indian RSS regime are not letting them meet Yasin Mullick. And also, his mother is appealing to the government of India right now to let her meet, and also release him on humanitarian basis so that they can meet. And the Indian government is not allowing that. In addition to that, we also have Raja Mirajuddin locked up in the Tihar jail, and his mother just died today. And the Indian RSS regime again is not allowing him to do her last rituals as well.
Yeah, it's very painful that Mr. Kalwal's, Mirajuddin Kalwal's mother died, and he's the only son, the child, and he has a wife and 4 children, and who is going to bury the mother from the male members? So it's very painful, and he's locked up in Tihar jail. And at the same time, I'm extremely worried about my mother-in-law especially, and my sister-in-law Abda Baji. She's diabetic, and my mother-in-law has multiple ailments, and she's actually in depression for the past 2 years because her only son is locked up not just in Tihar jail but in the death cell of Tihar jail and being physically and mentally tortured. So her overall health is growing weaker day by day, and now she has contracted COVID, and during this COVID she fell from the hospital bed, and her eyes are bruised, and she's in immense pain. And I look at her and I look at Kashmiri mothers and families and myself, but she's ailing. Her entire life has been a battleground for her. She has been attacked so many times by the Indian Army, because most of the time Yasin has been jailed or been hiding. I really feel sorry that when will the miseries of Kashmiri people end? I mean, this is her, she's in her late 70s. I mean, at this time, the way she's suffering, and she's all alone right now, and there's no male member of the family with her, and she's in a hospital, and I'm not even there for her, and her son is, being tortured. So it's very painful for all of us as a family. And then I've already, the kind of gap that we've had, 7 years have passed, and I've not seen my husband. So these 7 years have been like 7 decades for me. And then this separation is of pain, is of suffering and uncertainty. So it's like, it's very tough. It's very tough.
I mean, it is difficult for you to talk about this, and I can see the tears in your eyes right now, but we've also heard that the Indian regime also tried to poison your husband in jail.
Yes, they did, and he was in central jail a month after Burhan Wani's shahadat, when I mentioned earlier that a few months before his shahadat, a joint resistance leadership was formed between Syed Ali Geelani Sahab and my husband and Mr. Mirbais, and then Burhan Wani was martyred. And then a month after that, because he was locked up in central jail, they gave him a poisonous injection. Half of his body turned blue and black, And then some of the prisoners, they screamed and they started shouting, and the voices kind of got out of central jail to the neighboring houses, and they called up their family members and they said something's happened to Yasin, because the prisoners are screaming that Yasin's, is dying. And that's when my mother-in-law, she came running barefoot to outside central jail, and she was screaming that something will happen to to her son. And a lot of public came out, and that's when late at night they took him to a nursing home, a substandard nursing home, where they they started trying to clean his body. The body, how they, I'm forgetting, there was some dye injection that the nurse had used that had reacted on Mr. Yasin and had spread. So they tried to clean that, but it was very bad. It was half of his body was paralyzed. But if you go back, the entire struggle of Yasin, it's full of attacks and beatings and third-degree tortures, and he has faced a lot since his childhood, since he was 13, 14 years old. And sometimes his doctors say that he's a medical miracle, because he was poisoned in the early 90s also. He was given poison in jail, and he got blood food poisoning, and because of that his valve was changed to a metallic valve, and he has kidney problems. There are stones in his kidneys, leg infection, then he has pus in his head right now because of the the unhygienic and dilapidated condition over there within the death cell. So he has he's caught infection, and they've shaved off his hair. So it's a very depressing situation.
I mean, it is heartbreaking, and it's also completely barbaric from the Indian side. The Kashmiris, along with the leaders, have been continuously facing the Indian brutalities. Women have been raped, men have been killed, children have been sexually abused. And this has been going on for the past 7 decades and still counting now. What do you think is the solution to this? Really, what is the real solution to this?
The real solution is the implementation of the UN resolutions. Kashmiris should be given their principal right, the right to freedom and identity, to choose that in a very peaceful environment. There should be demilitarization, de-weaponization over there, and Kashmiris should be released from that prison, wherever they're locked up in various states. And also, when we talk about Article 370 and 35A, I mean, according to the UN resolutions also, nobody has a right to change the demography, according to the Geneva Convention 4 also, because India has violated that. And they have tried to shift lakhs and lakhs of Indians over there. So the simple solution is that India should just get out of Kashmir, and we should have a peaceful environment, and to safeguard the demography over there, because lakhs and lakhs of Indian public are being transported and being settled here. They are snatching our political rights, they are snatching our economic rights, our legal rights, our religious rights. Over 500 mosques have been demarcated to be, to be destroyed, and mandirs to be constructed over there. So they're challenging the Kashmiri Muslims over there on the basis of demography, because as they did in 1947, they changed the demography in Jammu by slaughtering over 5 lakh Muslims. So they changed the demography then, now it's the same RSS doing it right now. So if, God forbid, in the next 1 to 2 years, Munib, if this becomes into a complete Indian colony, into a mini India, because they've already given 40 lakh domicile certificates they've given to Indians, they've been issued in their favor, and 12 lakh voter rights have been given to Indians. So in the next year, if another 60 to 70, 80 lakh Indians are given domiciles residency certificates, then I'm afraid we will become a minority. So this is a very dangerous situation. So at this time, the simple solution is that India should be stopped from changing the demography. It's a violation of 4th Geneva Convention, and urgent basis, there should be a resolution tabled by the UN to ask India to conduct a population census. But an independent population census must be conducted over there.
Now, Mushaal,
to know exactly how many Kashmiris are there and how many Indians have been granted domiciles.
the Kashmir dispute is not of the past years. It has been going on for the past 7 decades now. And for the past 7 decades and more, the Kashmiri people and the Pakistani leadership, and along with other international countries, have been asking the United Nations for the implementations of the resolutions that are there in the United Nations and on Kashmir as a disputed land between India and Pakistan. We haven't seen any concrete action for the past 7 decades. Do you think you might see any concrete actions, or the world body might bring India accountable to its abuses, to its atrocities?
You know, actually, especially after the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, which I mentioned, that India committed a lawfare. When we talk about fifth generation warfare, lawfare is also a very important tool that is used, that through a stroke of a pen, you can take the rights of every person living in Kashmir and make them refugees and make them completely stateless. So this is what India did with Kashmiris. It is even worse than killing them, that making them stateless and kicking them out of their homes, removing them their ownership rights, snatching their property rights, taking away their economic rights, their religious, political, which I mentioned earlier. So I think it is the responsibility, the major responsibility or the main responsibility lies on the United Nations, the Security Council, because this is the oldest pending conflict in the UN agenda. And secondly, India has become the biggest violator of international law, of humanitarian law, of international treaties, Geneva Conventions, on even all the bilateral treaties. And right now, as I mentioned earlier, that technically this is not a part of any administrative control of India. It is jungle law over here, and Kashmiris are stateless. So at this time, we demand peacekeeping forces from the United Nations at urgent basis. We demand airdropping of food and medical supplies for all those people confined, locked up in double lockdowns, in curfews, under siege.
Rightly, and shortly, lastly, I would just like to ask you, what are your hopes from the current Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan?
Pakistan has always been a very vocal, strong voice for the Kashmiris, for their plight, and not just the Pakistani Prime Minister or the head of the state, but the public at large. And I witnessed that on ground over here, how people pray, how people support us, how they raise a voice for us. But right now, I think the current regime, I would say, Mr. Imran Khan, for him, it's extra challenging because shehra kat gayi hai, that this abrogation had not taken place in the previous regimes. Though in the previous regime of Mr. Modi, he was working on this agenda because it was part of his election manifesto. So it's not a shocker for any current regime also what India has done, because if you recall, a lot of search operations were going on in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir when Burhan Wani was martyred. Those were happening because through blasting villages and homes, they were trying to construct. They were trying to construct colonies over there, and they have introduced various economic welfare, social welfare policies for Indians to come and settle there, allotting thousands of acres of land to Indian industrialists, the tourist resorts, the dargahs, the shrines are in the Indian control. So it's extra challenging for Mr. Imran Khan. I think they must have a very strong team of international law experts along with them. They do support us, but I think a lot more needs to be done in a more rigorous, in a more consistent manner. I know there are a lot of challenges within the region, but now since the focus is moving away from Afghanistan, so I think it's Pakistan's core responsibility, not just for being a signatory and a sympathizer and a supporter of Kashmiris, but now because of the vacuum of the Hurriyat leadership right now that used to speak up for their public, and at least their statements used to come forward and be spread internationally. But I'm afraid now we don't even have that during this current regime. So Pakistan needs to try its level best to fill that vacuum, though they cannot fill it completely, but they need to do a lot more. They need to nominate more Kashmir envoys. They need to have a structure of, people around them that are expert on its history, on its lawfare, on how Pakistan can respond to the lawfare that India has done. They can take the matter internationally and challenge India against this heinous act that they committed.
Well, Mushaal Hussain Mullick, thank you very much for your time on Indus News. And here is, as you all heard, the tragic and brutalities that are happening currently in Kashmir, and with the leadership of the resistance movement in Kashmir, as Yasin Malik was poisoned in jail, and we are seeing every day continuous reports coming in from occupied Kashmir of women being raped, children being abused, men being killed. And the world needs to act now. This is Muneeb Hamid. Thank you for watching Newswire.